The movie opens with a scene of a woman named Melody skiing on a snowmobile in the middle of a forest. She loses control and falls, getting a branch stuck in her thigh. Determined to free herself, Melody spots a nearby house and makes her way toward it for help. Henry, a cautious man who lives in the house, arrives and carefully assesses the situation before deciding to assist Melody. He brings her inside to rest, and several hours later, he is seen sharpening various tools, including knives and scissors. It becomes evident that Henry intends to remove the wooden splinters still lodged in Melody's thigh. The story takes us a few months back in time, where we see Henry shaving his beard. It's revealed that Henry is not an ordinary man. He's a contract killer who has successfully eliminated 99 targets in the past. His next target is Kessler, a wealthy businessman with many companies. Henry keeps a close watch on Kessler, waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, when Kessler enters a sauna room, Henry seizes the opportunity and kills him without anyone noticing, thanks to the steam-filled room. With his mission accomplished, Henry calmly leaves the sauna and heads into a locker room. It becomes clear that he's here to collect payment for his deadly work. The next day, a line of cars made its way to the local cemetery. It was the day when they were going to bury Kessler, the man who had been killed. Two detectives, Kappa and his older partner Davies, were assigned to investigate Kessler's death. They talked about how it seemed like a very skilled person had carried out the murder. There were no clues left behind at the scene, except for Kessler's wristwatch. The bullets used in the crime were special polymer bullets that disintegrate after being fired. Later that day, Detectives Kappa and Davies got in touch with Kessler's trusted associate, Brigler. Detective Kappa asked if Kessler had any enemies or competitors who might have wanted him dead. Brigler explained that Kessler was a successful businessman with many big companies, so he had plenty of rivals who might have had a motive to kill him. Brigler also mentioned that Kessler had a son named Charlie, who was his only child. If something were to happen to Charlie, all of Kessler's companies would be auctioned separately, which is exactly what Kessler's business rivals wanted. Hearing this, Detective Kappa asked about Charlie's current whereabouts. Brigler explained that he had hidden Charlie in a safe place because he was worried that Charlie might be the next target. After getting all this information, Detective Kappa allowed Brigler to leave. The scene then shifted to Melody, who lived in an apartment. She was quietly packing her things. It turned out that Melody had been under the watchful eye of a bodyguard named Malcolm. In the early morning hours, Malcolm felt that something was wrong, so he entered Melody's room. To his surprise, Melody had escaped from her apartment. A few hours later, Melody was at a taxi stand, telling the driver where to take her. She reached the destination she wanted, which was a snowmobile rental place. Melody explained that she wanted to head towards the Pacific and rent a snowmobile for the journey. Initially, the rental owner hesitated because the trip would take a long time. However, after Melody offered a large sum of money, more than enough to cover the rental, the owner agreed. After a lengthy journey, Melody stopped to refuel. A young man approached her and offered a place to stay because there wouldn't be any more accommodations on the next part of her journey. Melody didn't respond and, after refueling, continued on her way. The next day, the scene showed a house deep within the Pacific forest, which was Henry's home, and he was busy assembling weapons. Soon after, Henry was startled by Melody's screams, the same scene we saw at the beginning of the movie. He rushed to help Melody and carefully removed the tree branch that was stuck in her thigh. Despite her intense pain, Henry told her to endure it. Meanwhile, Detectives Kappa and Davies were researching polymer bullets, which are bullets designed to disintegrate and leave no evidence behind. Detective Kappa speculated that the person who killed Kessler was likely a former military member or a trained contract killer. Later, Detective Kappa instructed one of his team members to trace Brigler's phone number. They needed to investigate anyone close to Kessler, including Brigler, who was Kessler's trusted associate. At the same time, Davies received news that he would be reassigned as per their superior's request. This meant he couldn't continue working on solving Kessler's murder case. Detective Kappa appeared saddened but still supportive of his colleague, wishing him the best. Returning to Melody, she was taken aback when Henry brought a deer into the house. Henry explained that he had to protect the deer from the wolves lurking outside, ready to attack. This surprised Melody, as she didn't expect Henry to be so kind. She thanked him for taking care of her and tending to her wounds. Curious about why she was in this area, Henry learned that Melody was on an adventure after being stuck in her apartment for a long time. Henry then asked her to start practicing walking as he wanted a peaceful life without any disruptions, including Melody. The next morning, Henry went to the spot where Melody had fallen the day before. While examining the area, he was slightly puzzled as there were no apparent obstacles that could have caused her fall. However, he was soon startled by the presence of wolves drawn by the scent of Melody's blood. Henry quickly grabbed his weapon, which surprisingly frightened the wolves and made them retreat. Meanwhile, inside the house, Melody, feeling thirsty, tried to reach for a drink on the table, but ended up falling due to her still unhealed wound. Not long after, Henry returned and found Melody in pain. It turned out there was still a wooden splinter in her stomach. Henry decided to carefully remove the splinter. He then gave Melody some water to drink and a piece of cotton to bite on to help her endure the pain. On the other hand, Detective Kappa was diligently examining files related to all the phone calls made by Brigler. After thorough checking, Detective Kappa finally noticed that Brigler had a brief 5-second phone call with someone named Malcolm. This raised Detective Kappa's suspicions and piqued his curiosity about who Malcolm really was. Meanwhile, Malcolm had reached the snowmobile rental location in search of Melody. Malcolm showed a photo of Melody to the rental owner and asked if he had seen her. At first, the rental owner remained silent, but after being offered some money, he eventually revealed that the woman had headed towards the Pacific. The rental owner had placed GPS devices on all the snowmobiles he rented out, but unfortunately, the GPS on Melody's snowmobile seemed to have been deactivated. Upon hearing this, Malcolm promptly rented a snowmobile and set off to find Melody. Meanwhile, Melody, who was gradually recovering from her injuries, curious about Henry's solitary life in the forest, she asks him why he chose to live alone. Henry explains that he grew tired of the city's busy life and preferred the tranquility of the secluded forest to enjoy a peaceful existence. As they converse, Melody shares more about herself, hoping to establish a closer connection with Henry. Meanwhile, Detective Kappa visits Kessler's ex-wife at a hospital. His purpose is to gather information about Kessler and those close to him. Unfortunately, Kessler's ex-wife, who has been separated from him for a long time, cannot provide much information due to her struggle with dementia. Before departing, Detective Kappa offers Kessler's wristwatch, thinking it might be passed down to their son, Charlie. However, Kessler's ex-wife clarifies that Charlie is, in fact, a girl. This revelation surprises Detective Kappa, as he had previously assumed Charlie was a boy. That night, Malcolm finds himself caught in a snowstorm and seeks refuge at the last inn on his way to the Pacific. He orders a drink to warm up from the extreme cold outside. Meanwhile, Henry tends to Melody's sprained hand, which she had injured during her fall the day before. Melody, curious about Henry's proficiency in treating injuries, inquires why he seems so skilled. Henry explains that living alone in the forest has made him self-reliant and capable of various tasks. The following day, while Henry is outside, Melody assembles a pistol, revealing her true intention for a revenge. She is trained in martial arts and marksmanship to eliminate Henry. Melody confronts Henry while he is fishing by a river and shoots him in the head without hesitation. However, it turns out to be a trap because Henry had anticipated her actions. Not long after, Henry proceeds to interrogate Melody, determined to uncover her identity and the reason behind her desire to kill him. At first, Melody remains silent, but unable to endure the torment, she eventually confesses that she is Kessler's biological daughter, seeking vengeance against Henry. Henry is taken aback by this revelation because he believed that Kessler's biological child was a boy named Charlie. In reality, Charlie is Melody. The one pulling the strings behind all of this is Brigler, Kessler's trusted associate, who instructed Melody to carry out this plan. Eventually, out of sympathy, Henry agrees to let Melody go. A few hours later, during a snowstorm, Melody secretly ventures outside to activate a GPS transmitter she had hidden under the snowmobile. However, Henry had already disabled the transmitter, forcing Melody to return inside the house. Here, Henry discloses that he was contracted not only to eliminate Kessler's child, but also believed that the child was a boy. Furthermore, according to his client, both Kessler and the child are skilled fraudsters, which is why Henry accepted the contract in the first place. Intrigued by this revelation, Melody asks who had actually hired Henry for this job. Henry reveals that it was Brigler who had instructed him, and he even still has Brigler's phone number. Melody then explains that her father, Kessler, had a strong desire for a male child, which is why her family often referred to her as Charlie. On the other hand, Detective Kappa attempts to contact Brigler, but his calls go unanswered. Detective Kappa starts suspecting that Brigler might be the mastermind behind everything, with plans to seize all of Kessler's wealth. The following morning, Malcolm is still stuck at the inn due to the ongoing snowstorm. He receives a message with a map from an unknown phone number. When he opens the message, he realizes it's Detective Kappa trying to hack into his phone. Detective Kappa succeeds in locating Malcolm's whereabouts and quickly contacts his colleague, Davies, who happens to be working nearby. He asks Davies for assistance in finding Malcolm. Not long after, Malcolm continues his journey. As night falls, Henry's house is in disarray due to the recent snowstorm. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the sound of gunshots, which are fired by Malcolm. It becomes clear that Malcolm didn't come to rescue Melody, but to eliminate her and Henry, following Brigler's orders. However, Malcolm's relief is short-lived as Henry starts chasing him, and the confrontation ends with Henry using a knife to kill Malcolm. The following morning, Detective Kappa and Davies arrive and spot Melody's snowmobile on the side of the road. Meanwhile, Melody, upon seeing Henry with a knife, becomes frightened, believing he intends to harm her. In reality, Henry had chased away a wolf. Later, when she has the opportunity, Melody strikes Henry and quickly makes her escape. Henry, in anger, fires a warning shot which catches the attention of Detective Kappa and Davies. Not long after, Henry catches up with Melody, but he isn't trying to harm her. He's protecting her from a wolf. Unfortunately, Detective Kappa and Davies mistake the situation and shoot Henry, thinking he's a threat to Melody. As the police start arriving, Melody goes into the house to retrieve something. She appears sad, reflecting on all the kindness Henry showed her. Eventually, Melody comes out and provides the police with Brigler's phone number, which she obtained from Henry. In the end, Melody becomes the sole heir to her father Kessler's wealth. The story concludes. Moral lesson from the story: if you're planning a wild adventure with snowmobiles on a revenge missions, don't forget to pack a GPS transmitter and maybe a weapon. You could end up in a forest with a branch in your thigh or a pack of wolves lurking nearby.